So let me ask you: do you think that it's mainly because of recruiting? Like it's just been a big drop off. 'Cause, I mean, you think about that area, Syracuse, Pitt, places like that, where historically Pennsylvania used to be a great football state, and has no longer been that. I would say for the majority of my life, I'm 26. I haven't really heard of a big time play out of Pennsylvania in forever. Um, do you think that
Different
it's just
brand of
big?
football up there.
Yeah, just a different area,
Yeah. So like
location.
Syracuse, if anybody's ever been there before, like Mark, have you been to Syracuse?
I went to Syracuse once to take my daughter there for a college visit. She didn't make that choice, but we went there. Yeah.
It's not like it ain't New York. It ain't what people think. Like when you think it ain't New York City. So
No.
it's cold. Like they it's just it's hard to be really good in college. I just there's a graphic, right, that got put up about where the national champions in the last 20 years have come from. I think it's 20. Yeah, in the BCS era, since BCS and playoff era, where the national championships have come from. It's the South with Ohio, with Columbus, Ohio State, and then USC. I'd argue if you go you can go back 10 more years and go to the 80s, you'll have a little bit of spot where you got Nebraska in there. Oklahoma would be in there as well. But it's still going to be very, Michigan every now and then, but it's still going to be very heavily centered in the South. And regardless of what people want to believe or not, 14% of the population makes up 80% of the population in college football. And if you look at where the heavy concentrations are of that 14% of the population, you know where it's at? It's literally in all of the places that have won national championships. And when you think about what's happened, and now that people are really being able to be seen anywhere, and the resurgence of more schools coming. So with the South Floridas of the world, with the UCFs, with the FIUs, the FAUs, the guys from Florida who used to go up to Syracuse or Nebraska because they just want to play ball and you can play on national TV. Why would I go there when I could just go around the corner and my mama going to see me on TV? Florida State's is easy, but you're in a hotbed. You're in a fertile ground. Georgia, Atlanta is one of the biggest places. Kirby can walk out his doorstep and recruit everything that he possibly needs and not have to go nationwide. Syracuse literally has to use resources to get people to bring stuff back, to import people, because you can't get it done in your recruiting base. I hate to say it, but you bring a bunch of people from New York down here to Florida in October, and it's 95 degrees down here, and these guys are just sprinting and running circles around you. You can't find that up that way. So that's kind of just the way it really is until they change the brand of football. But speed kills. You can't hit what you can't catch. It'll always be like that.
I'll agree with that to a point. You still have certain position groups, namely offensive linemen. Florida's not producing the best offensive linemen. They're not. Most of them are still coming from up north. And teams like Wisconsin and Nebraska would be proof of that. And even Michigan. A lot of your big name QBs are still coming from out west in Cali. So I think it's more broken down positionally to different regions. South Florida and the state of Florida in general, that's your hotbed for your skill positions, wide receivers, running backs, corners, safeties, edge rushers. But, I mean, look at Miami got 2 of the 3 top offensive linemen in the nation. Neither one of them are from Florida.
I think to your point too, Slim, because I think you hit on a good point, especially when it comes to offensive linemen and stuff like that. The one that's up north, you mentioned Wisconsin and Iowa and Nebraska. Well, that's just the thing, especially when we were talking about it from a Syracuse standpoint. They're just going to Big Ten country. I think that's the biggest thing, is that a lot of that, a lot of those places in the Northeast are just dominated by Big Ten schools now. I mean, pretty much it's a hotbed for all of those schools to go in and recruit. And you got obviously you got Penn State just right in that region too. So I mean, there's so much.
I mean, they even started to creep into the DMV, which was like the side chick, the second piece that people could dip into.
Yeah, that
because
was
it's such a great football place. You got places like Penn
for a long
State,
time.
Minnesota, Ohio State dipping their fingers into the DMV. I hate to cut you off, but I just want to throw that in to push your point. You can go ahead and finish, bro.
No, but that's a great point though, because the DMV used to be, the schools like, a lot of the schools in the South, especially schools that couldn't really go down into South Florida and get guys. That used to be the hotbed, and it's like you could nab whoever you needed in the DMV, and it wasn't necessarily overrun by northern schools that were trying to get guys. But now everybody knows how talented that region is, and a lot of those kids are going to the Big Ten schools, or they're going to obviously the traditional. So it's just. The talent that you do get up north is not going to a lot of those. It's not going to the Syracuses and the Pitts of the world. It's going to Penn State. It's going to Ohio State. It's going to Wisconsin, Iowa. So I think that's kind of the biggest barrier for a lot of the northern schools, that the old Big East contingent, Boston College, within the ACC. So if those schools can't start keeping some of that talent, it's going to be tough for those schools to rise anyway. So,
well, and a lot of that I think takes, getting, I don't want to say the right guy, because I don't necessarily think that, I think you have guys like Nick Saban that could be successful anywhere he goes. But I think a lot of people tend to forget that college football is cyclical. I mean, before Saban got on this run, most Alabama fans were NASCAR fans. I'm old enough to remember when people talked about Tom Osborne the way they talk about Nick Saban now, as most people hating him. I mean, Tom Osborne dominated college football for almost 40 years. And, we look at Nebraska over the past 15 or so years, and we think, well, that's just Nebraska. Well, no. We've seen a plethora of teams go through that, Miami included, and some of them are shorter. Perfect example, Ohio State, making in that little in between time from Jim Tressel to Urban Meyer. They ended up hiring the right guy, but you see teams like Miami, like Nebraska, that don't hire the right person, and that's where you end up with these 15, 20-year droughts with them.
But I guess that sounds good, but like literally in the last 20 years, there have been 3 national championships outside of the South. And if you go back 10 more years, it's been maybe Osborne won 2 or 3 in Nebraska.
3.
I think
94, 95, 97.
No, okay.
So not to
97, they split that with Michigan, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean,
didn't Osborne win one in the 70s
like,
too when he first took over?
No.
And even when people talk about Alabama, like people gotta remember, I played in I went to school in 02. Alabama was not anywhere near as bad as what people are trying to make them. Like go back.
Thank you. They try to make it
record.
seem like Alabama was y'all going 5-7 or something like that.
People make it seem like Alabama was like just
one
going
season
4-11, like or something like that. Like they weren't
right.
that bad.
Well, at that time, Alabama was on sanctions, so it really didn't matter what they did at that time.
And so you got guys that but when we really talk about it's been pretty even with Tom Osborne, like during that time, you had Bobby Bowden and everybody in the GOAT. What was my man? Dadgum, I can't think of his name. Schnellenberger. Yeah, Schnellenberger. I'd take him. You got Jimmy Johnson that was down there. Dennis Erickson. You had a group of Miami cats that was just running like it's college football is dominated by the most organized, bombastic, and physical teams. That's what's consistent. When you look at what Alabama is, what is Saban? Saban is just extremely organized, they put resources in there. And while he's not arrogant in a state where I'm Nick Saban. I'm going to stand on the tallest mountaintop and make sure the world knows it. He has a confidence of when he walks in the room that he's got the biggest set in there. He's the guy that will call a kid on the Zoom during COVID, and he the recruiting tactic people use against him is you can't play there because Alabama's too deep. And he'll tell you that I wouldn't be on the phone talking to you if I didn't think you could play here. And he'll show him the national championship rings. So like that's what happens. Even with Bobby, people think Bobby was just this oh shucks, Jesus loves the little children guy without realizing that he had Mickey Andrews. Mickey Andrews and Chuck Amato ain't following no pump. That old man had some teeth too. Like, don't get it twisted. And he was a confident mofo. And that's not even bringing up Spurrier during that time, who's probably the most arrogant, bombastic, out there loud, doing these things. That's what fortune favors the bold. And that's what Kirby's smart right now. Kirby is a organized, resources, bombastic, arrogant mofo. That's why I can understand why Miami fans were drawn to what Mario Cristobal was bringing in, because they were bringing in resources. They got a ton of off-field staff, bombastic, going out there, and it was a machine. That's the only way to win in college football. And the problem is, what makes it kind of cyclical, or when people fall back, is when you rest on your laurels and you're not being progressive. You think it's good enough. I'd argue that we would not know who Nick Saban is if they would have gave Bobby Bowden the indoor practice facility in 1996 that he asked for. Like, because the argument always, and that Jimbo had to fight for, was Bobby won without it. What happens is fan bases not fan bases per se, but boosters and the people within the organization say, well, you know what, we're winning. The guys like Kirby, the guys like Nick are the ones that consistently say, that ain't it. I need more. Nick Saban right now, after seeing what Kirby's saying, he's about to go, I don't know what he's about to do. He about to do something crazy. And even when it comes to the gimmicks of off the field stuff, like, they've got a 35,000 square feet cafeteria at Alabama. I don't even know why you need a 35,000 square foot cafeteria for football, but it's impressive. They have a museum for football. I don't know why you need that, but it's impressive. There is somebody's job to see what Nick Saban dreams and comes up with and create it before he asks for it. That's how you win college football. And I think my alma mater, Florida State, is trying to do that, but I do see rivals and I do see other people who are at least understanding that you're either going to spend money or you're going to fall by the wayside. You'll accidentally be in the G5 if you're not spending money like you're a big boy school.
That's a great point. Never thought I would give a compliment to a Tallahassee person, but it's all right. I guess your degree worked something. Anyway, that's a great point, man. Because Miami's big problem, very similar to that, was that we got the most recruiting base. We got the best recruiting base. We don't need this. We don't need knickknacks and tacks or whatever or shine a special penny to show them. We just got to get the best recruits in Miami to all come to Miami and keep replicating it. And it sounds like that's exactly what was happening throughout the entire state. I mean, the state of Florida is the best. No question about that, as far as putting out talent, especially high school talent. And if you want to, funnel all of that to one institution, then of course you're probably going to win a bunch of games. And now you see, even though we did not win on the football field this previous season at 5-7, but as far as investing, being ahead in NIL deals, being progressive and getting our indoor practice facility, and now giving that away, and now building a 7-story one over the next 2 seasons on campus at the University of Miami. It's something that, if you pay attention to all of the elite teams, they continuously do it. Now, you got to also win on the football field and invest in your staff and blah, 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 or you'll just end up like Tennessee and have like a great visit, but you just don't win games. I mean, they have amazing facilities in Tennessee, absolutely amazing. Kentucky has amazing facilities. But then you look at a place like Clemson, where it's like, we took a bit on the facilities, but we won on the football field. They added the facilities after that, and now you got the best of both worlds.
Texas, Florida. I think that's a good argument.
It's not.
It's a good argument, wholesome one.
One out of every 200, I believe this year was 1 out of every 200 eligible football players in the state of Florida signed FBS offers. The next closest is double that. Argument's done.
Simple as that.
Less football
best
players, more, just as many signees, if not more. That's just the argument. Texas is a bigger state with a larger population. Don't get me wrong.
what
So
I'm
they'll
looking
have
at.
the same with California. But I think when it's just more concentrated with who plays here, and then our guys play soccer and other sports too, so we have to compete with a lot of that.
And that's what
Soccer,
I'm looking at is just
baseball.
overall who's producing the most players, and I think it's extremely close.
Oh yeah. No, I'm saying that the numbers are close. I'm just saying like they have
Florida does
double
it
the
with
amount
less.
of people to pull from
I got
than
you.
we do.
Yeah.
Just like if
Per
you're looking at
capita.
Louisiana, what they
Yeah.
do is amazing.
Yeah, like their per capita is out of this world.
Yeah, now
Yeah.
Louisiana would
Yeah.
probably be I'd argue that Louisiana is
It also is a
per
crazy
capita is
stat.
probably a way better argument, man. Them boys.
I don't know if y'all ever heard this stat, but I have Polynesian in my blood. So if you're half or 100% Polynesian or have that like Polynesian blood in you, there was a stat that there's an 18% chance that you would be in the National Football League if you played football.
Jeez.
I believe it. I believe it.
Because
That
you gotta-
reminds me of something. I don't mean to cut you off, but that reminds me of something. We were talking about a minute ago. We were talking about players come out of the state of Pennsylvania. A half Polynesian player by the name of Dwayne Johnson was living in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Good point.
I didn't know that's where the Rock was from.
Yeah, when he first moved to the States, yes, sir, that's where he was living.
Yeah, Rocky's lived in a lot of places, man.
He has.
Born and raised in Hawaii, moved up there. I mean, he went to school with my dad, so of course he was in Miami at the time. But yeah, he was in South Florida, closer to high school, and then of course went to the U. But yeah, good point.